I killed a child in 1945. He was maybe 14 years old, wearing a uniform too big for him, holding a rifle he barely knew how to use. For 80 years, I've kept his face locked in my mind, never speaking his name because I didn't know it, never telling anyone what happened because I was too ashamed. But I'm 98 years old now, and silence has been eating me alive. So I'm going to tell you about the worst thing I ever did. Not for forgiveness, I don't deserve that, but because some truths need to be spoken before they die with you. My name is Frank. You know me from the other stories I've told. The German soldier I saved, the French girl who hid me from the Nazis. Those stories had redemption in them, lessons about compassion and humanity. This one doesn't. This one is just about the terrible weight you carry when you do something you can never undo, never make right, never escape from. This is about the cost of war that nobody wants to talk about, the children who die, and the soldiers who have to live with killing them. This happened in March 1945. The war was almost over, but nobody knew that yet. We were pushing into Germany, moving from town to town, clearing out the last resistance. The Germans were desperate. They'd lost millions of soldiers. Their army was collapsing, so they started drafting everyone, old men, young boys, anyone who could hold a weapon. They called it the Volkssturm, the People's Army. It was a suicide mission dressed up as patriotism. We'd been fighting for 5 straight days, barely any sleep, living on adrenaline and fear. We'd taken a small town after heavy fighting and were moving through the rubble, checking buildings, making sure no one was hiding, waiting to ambush us. The town was destroyed. Artillery had torn it apart. Bodies everywhere, civilians mixed with soldiers. It was hell on earth. I was with my squad, 6 of us, moving through what used to be a residential area. Davis, our sergeant, was leading. We were all exhausted, nerves frayed, jumping at every sound. That's when the shooting started. Gunfire from a building about 50 yards ahead. We hit the ground, returned fire, standard procedure. The shooting was coming from a second-story window. Whoever was up there had a clear line of sight on the street. We were pinned down. Davis called for covering fire. 3 guys laid down suppression while Davis, myself, and another private named Jackson flanked around to the side of the building. We breached through a blown-out wall, moved through the ground floor. The place was a mess. Furniture overturned. Family pictures on the walls covered in dust and debris. These had been people's homes. Now they were combat zones. We moved up the stairs, weapons ready. The shooting from the second story had stopped. Either they were reloading or waiting for us. We reached the top of the stairs, a hallway with 3 doors. Davis signaled we'd clear each room systematically. We hit the first room, empty. Second room, empty. That left the third room at the end of the hall, the one where the shooting had come from. Davis kicked the door open. We rushed in, weapons up, ready to fire. And there he was, standing in the corner of the room next to a broken window, wearing a gray Wehrmacht uniform that was way too big for him. The sleeves hung past his hands. The helmet kept sliding down over his eyes. He was holding a Mauser rifle, the kind German infantry used, and he was trying to reload it. His hands were shaking so badly he kept dropping the ammunition. When we burst in, he looked up at us with these wide, terrified eyes, and I saw his face clearly. Just a kid. Couldn't have been more than 14, maybe 15 years old. Blonde hair, thin face, probably hadn't eaten properly in months. He looked like he should be in a classroom somewhere, not in a uniform holding a rifle. But there he was, and he was trying to raise that weapon toward us. "Drop it!" Davis was screaming. "Drop the weapon, now!" The kid didn't drop it. Maybe he didn't understand English. Maybe he was too scared to think. Maybe he'd been told that Americans would torture and kill prisoners. Whatever the reason, he kept trying to raise that rifle. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold it. He was crying, tears streaming down his face, but he was still trying to point it at us. Everything happened in seconds, but I remember it like it was in slow motion. Davis had his rifle trained on the kid. So did Jackson. So did I. We were all screaming at him to drop the weapon. The kid was crying and trying to aim. And then Davis made the call. "If he points that rifle at us, we fire. Understood?"
The kid managed to get the rifle up. Not steady, not really aimed, but up, pointing in our general direction. His finger was on the trigger. And that was it. That was the line. In combat, you don't wait to see if someone's going to shoot. You don't give them the chance. If they're pointing a weapon at you, you fire first. That's survival. That's training. That's war. 3 shots, almost simultaneous. Davies, Jackson, and me. All 3 of us fired. The kid went down. The rifle clattered to the floor. We waited a moment, making sure he wasn't getting back up, wasn't reaching for a grenade or another weapon. Then we moved forward to check the body. I got there first, rolled him over. He'd been hit twice in the chest, once in the shoulder. He was still alive, barely. Blood was bubbling from his mouth. He looked up at me with those terrified eyes and tried to say something. I couldn't understand the words. German. He was speaking German. Then his eyes went unfocused, and he stopped breathing. Just like that. 14 years old and dead on the floor of a destroyed building in a town that probably didn't even have a name anymore. Davies checked him for identification, found a paper in his pocket. Not official military ID, just a piece of paper with a name written on it in pencil. Klaus Zimmerman. That was it. No rank, no unit designation. Just a name. Davies pocketed the paper, and we moved on. There was no time to think about it, no time to process. We had a job to do. Clear the building, secure the area, keep moving. That's how you survive. You don't think. You just do. But I couldn't stop seeing his face. That night, when we finally stopped to rest, I kept seeing those eyes looking up at me. Kept hearing him trying to say something I couldn't understand. Kept thinking about how his hands had been shaken so badly he could barely hold the rifle. He wasn't a soldier. He was a child dressed up as a soldier and thrown into a meat grinder by old men who'd already lost the war but wouldn't admit it. I tried to justify it. He had a weapon. He was pointing it at us. We gave him a chance to surrender. He didn't take it. In the rules of war, everything we did was correct, legal, necessary. But knowing something is legally justified doesn't make it feel right. It doesn't stop you from seeing that kid's face every time you close your eyes. The war ended 2 months later. Germany surrendered in May. I came home that summer, tried to build a normal life, married Sarah, had children, got a job, played the part of the veteran who'd done his duty and moved on. But I never moved on from Klaus Zimmerman. That was his name, Klaus. I never forgot it. I said it to myself sometimes, late at night, when Sarah was asleep, just to make sure I remembered. Klaus Zimmerman, 14 years old, killed in a nameless town in Germany by 3 American soldiers who were just following orders. I never told Sarah, never told my children, never told anyone. What would I say? Honey, I killed a child during the war and I can't stop thinking about it. That's not the kind of thing you share. That's not the kind of thing people want to hear. Everyone wants to believe their soldiers are heroes who only kill bad guys. Nobody wants to hear about the terrified 14-year-old boy who died because old men sent him to fight with a rifle he didn't know how to use. For years I tried to justify it, tried to convince myself it was war and these things happen. He had a weapon. He made a choice. It was him or us. All of that is true, but none of it makes it okay. None of it brings him back. None of it gives him the life he should have had, the life where he grows up, falls in love, has children, gets old. I got all of that. Klaus Zimmerman got a bullet and an unmarked grave.
I thought about trying to find his family. After the war, when things settled down, I thought about going back to Germany and tracking down anyone named Zimmerman in that region. But I couldn't do it. What would I say to them? Hello, I'm the man who killed your son, your brother, your grandson. I just wanted you to know I think about it sometimes. That's not closure. That's not healing. That's just transferring my guilt onto people who've already lost everything. So I carried it alone for decades. The weight of it never got lighter. If anything, it got heavier as I got older. When my own sons were 14, I looked at them and saw Klaus. When my grandsons turned 14, I saw Klaus. Every child that age, I wondered if that's what he would have looked like if he'd lived. If he'd have been good at sports, if he'd have been smart in school, if he'd have been kind to his friends. I'd stolen all of that, not just from him, from everyone who loved him. Sarah died in 2019. We'd been married for 75 years. At her funeral, standing there listening to people talk about her life, about the impact she'd had on people, I thought about Klaus Zimmerman again. Nobody stood at a funeral talking about his life. Nobody got to share stories about him. Nobody got to remember him growing old. His story ended at 14 in a destroyed building with 3 American soldiers pointing rifles at him. After Sarah died, I started thinking maybe I should tell someone. Maybe carrying this secret was making it worse. Maybe speaking it out loud would help. But who do you tell? A therapist?
What are they going to say? It's not your fault, you were following orders? That doesn't help. A priest? I'm not religious. My children? They're in their 70s now. Why burden them with this? Then a year ago, my grandson convinced me to start sharing my war stories. Said people needed to hear them. Said there was value in preserving history. I told him about Heinrich, the German soldier I saved, about Marie, the French girl who hid me from the Nazis. Those were the good stories, the ones with redemption, the ones that showed humanity in the darkness. But those aren't the whole truth. The whole truth includes Klaus Zimmermann. And if I'm going to tell my story honestly, I have to tell that part too. So here it is, the part I've kept hidden for 80 years. I killed the child. His name was Klaus Zimmermann. He was 14 years old. He was crying and shaking and couldn't even reload his rifle properly. And I shot him. Along with 2 other soldiers, I shot him. Twice in the chest, once in the shoulder. He died on the floor, looking up at me, trying to say something I couldn't understand. Was it justified? By the rules of war, yes. He had a weapon. He was pointing it at us. We gave him a chance to surrender. In a court of law, I'd be cleared. No charges, no crime. Just a soldier doing his job. But justification doesn't equal absolution. Legal doesn't mean moral. And following orders doesn't mean you don't carry the weight of what you did. People want war stories to be simple. Good guys versus bad guys. Heroes versus villains. But war isn't simple. War is a 14-year-old boy drafted by desperate old men and given a rifle he can't use. War is 3 American soldiers who have to make a split-second decision. War is everyone doing what they think they have to do to survive, and someone dying because of it. There are no good answers in moments like that. There's just blood and bodies and choices that haunt you forever. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. Klaus Zimmermann is still dead. His family still lost him. Nothing I say changes that. I'm not even sure I deserve to live with this guilt. Maybe I deserve worse. But I'm 98 years old, and I'll be dead soon. And I needed to say his name out loud. Klaus Zimmermann. I needed someone else to know he existed, to know he died, to know he mattered. After I started telling my war stories, I did something I should have done 70 years ago. I hired a researcher in Germany to look into Klaus Zimmermann, to find out if there were any surviving family members, to learn something, anything, about who he was beyond a terrified kid in an oversized uniform. It took months. Records from that time are scattered, incomplete. A lot was destroyed in the war. But the researcher found something. Klaus Zimmermann had a younger sister. She was 10 when Klaus died. She's 89 now, still alive, living in a care home near Hamburg. Her name is Greta Zimmermann Fischer. She married, had children, built a life. The researcher asked if she'd be willing to talk to me. I expected her to say no. I expected anger, hatred, a door slammed in my face. But she said yes. Last month I flew to Germany. My children thought I was crazy, a 98-year-old man flying across the Atlantic. But I had to go. I had to face her. I had to tell her what happened to her brother. The researcher came with me to translate. We drove to the care home, and there she was, Greta, 89 years old, white hair, kind eyes. She looked at me, and I saw Klaus in her face. The same features, the same expression. We sat in a quiet room. The researcher translated. I told her everything. How I met her brother. What happened in that building. How he died. I didn't spare any details. Didn't try to make myself look better. Just told her the truth. When she finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she spoke, and the researcher translated. She said, "I thought you would be a monster, the man who killed my brother. I thought you would be evil. But you are just an old man carrying a terrible weight, like all of us who survived that war." She told me about Klaus. He'd been a good student, loved mathematics, wanted to be an engineer. When the Hitler Youth came to their school recruiting boys for the Volkssturm, Klaus tried to refuse, but their father was already dead, killed on the Eastern Front. Their mother was sick. If Klaus didn't go, the Nazis threatened to take away their ration cards, to evict them from their home. Klaus went to protect his family. He'd been in uniform for less than 2 weeks when he died.
He was terrified, Greta said. He wrote me one letter before he died. He said he didn't know how to be a soldier. He said he was scared all the time. He said he wished he could come home. The letter arrived 3 days after we learned he was dead. I started crying, couldn't help it. This woman, who had every right to hate me, was telling me about her brother, the boy I'd killed, making him real, making him human, not just a face in my memory, but a person with dreams and fears and a sister who loved him. "I have been angry for 80 years, she said. Angry at the soldiers who killed him, angry at the Nazis who sent him, angry at the war, angry at God. But anger is exhausting, and you are here. You came all this way to tell me the truth, to say his name. That takes courage." "I don't deserve your forgiveness," I said. "No," she agreed. "You do not. But I am giving it anyway. Not for you, for me. Because I am 89 years old and I am tired of being angry. I am tired of hating. Klaus would not want me to spend my last years filled with hate. He was a gentle boy. He loved people. Even when they made him a soldier, he stayed gentle. That is why he was shaking so badly. That is why he could not shoot you. He was not a killer. He was a mathematician who loved his sister." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a photograph, black and white, faded with age. It showed 2 children, a boy about 12 and a girl about 8. They were standing in front of a house, smiling at the camera. The boy had his arm around the girl's shoulders. "This is Klaus," she said, pointing to the boy. "This is the brother I remember. Not the soldier, not the boy in the oversized uniform. This, the boy who taught me mathematics, who walked me to school, who made me laugh when our father died and our mother cried. This is who you need to remember." She pressed the photograph into my hands. "Keep this," she said. "Remember him as he was, not just as the boy you had to kill. Remember that he was loved, that he mattered, that his life, short as it was, had value." I took the photograph, looked at Klaus smiling at the camera, arm around his little sister, no idea that in a few years he'd be dead in a destroyed building in a town with no name. I couldn't speak, just nodded. "War makes monsters of us all," Greta said. "The question is, what we do after. Do we hide from what we've done, or do we face it? You are facing it. That is more than most soldiers do. So I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because holding on to this anger hurts me more than it hurts you. And Klaus would not want me to let it go." We sat together for another hour. She told me more stories about Klaus, about their childhood, about the things he loved, about the person he was before the Nazis took him. I listened to every word, tried to memorize them, tried to replace the image of him dying with the image of him living. It doesn't erase what happened, doesn't change anything, but it helped me see him as more than my guilt, as a person who existed beyond that one terrible moment. When I left, Greta hugged me. This woman whose brother I killed 80 years ago hugged me and said, "Thank you for coming. Thank you for remembering him. Thank you for carrying his name all these years. That is more than most get." I'm back home now. That photograph of Klaus and Greta sits on my desk. I look at it every day. It doesn't make what I did okay. It doesn't give me absolution. But it reminds me that Klaus Zimmermann was a real person, not just a casualty, not just a number. A boy who loved mathematics and his sister. A boy who was scared and shaking and didn't want to be a soldier. A boy who deserved better than what the world gave him. I'm telling you this story because I'm 98 years old and I'll be dead soon. And when I die, I want someone to remember Klaus Zimmermann, to know that he lived, to know that he mattered, to know that war took him too soon and it wasn't fair and it wasn't right, even though it was legal and justified and necessary in that moment. War creates impossible situations. It puts children in uniforms and gives them rifles. It forces good people to make terrible choices. It turns human beings into enemies and makes us kill each other for causes we barely understand. And then it expects us to live with what we've done, to carry the weight forever, to justify it or bury it or pretend it didn't happen. But it did happen. Klaus Zimmermann died on March 7th, 1945. He was 14 years old. He was killed by 3 American soldiers who were following orders and trying to survive. One of those soldiers was me, and I've carried his face for 80 years, not as punishment, not as penance, but as responsibility. Because if I forget him, if I let him fade into history as just another casualty, then his death means nothing. But if I remember him, if I speak his name, if I tell people about the gentle boy who loved mathematics and his sister, then maybe his life matters. Maybe his death matters. Maybe all this suffering means something. I don't know if there's a heaven. I don't know if I'll see Klaus Zimmermann again after I die. If I do, I don't know what I'll say to him. I'm sorry seems inadequate, but it's all I have. I'm sorry, Klaus. I'm sorry you were drafted. I'm sorry you were terrified. I'm sorry you had to die at 14. I'm sorry I was the one who killed you, and I'm sorry it took me 80 years to have the courage to tell your story.
To everyone watching this, I need you to understand something. War isn't glorious. It isn't heroic. It isn't something to celebrate. War is Klaus Zimmermann shaking so badly he can't reload a rifle. War is 3 soldiers shooting a child because they have no choice. War is 80 years of guilt that never goes away. War is a sister who spent her whole life missing her brother. War is mothers and fathers burying their children. War is the end of dreams and futures and possibilities. When politicians talk about war, when they wave flags and play patriotic music and talk about necessary sacrifices, remember Klaus Zimmermann. Remember that those sacrifices are real people, real children, real families destroyed. And ask yourself if whatever cause they're selling is worth it. Ask yourself if anything is worth sending 14-year-old boys to die in destroyed buildings. I served in World War II. People call it the Good War because we were fighting Hitler, fighting fascism, fighting for freedom. And maybe it was necessary. Maybe there was no other choice. But even in a necessary war, even in a justified war, children die, and the soldiers who kill them have to live with it forever. There's nothing good about that. There's nothing noble about carrying the face of a dead child for 80 years. I saved Heinrich, the German soldier, because I believed in mercy. Marie saved me because she believed in kindness. Those stories have hope in them. They show that even in darkness, humanity survives. But this story is just darkness. This is the reality of war that nobody wants to talk about. The cost that gets paid in blood and guilt and broken souls. Greta gave me her forgiveness. I'll be grateful for that until the day I die. But forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. Klaus Zimmermann is still dead. He still never got to become an engineer. He still never got to fall in love or have children or grow old. His sister still spent 80 years missing his brother. I got to live. He didn't. That's not fair. That's not justice. That's just the random cruelty of war. So I'm telling his story. I'm making sure someone knows his name. I'm doing what I should have done 80 years ago. Facing what I did, speaking the truth, refusing to hide behind justifications and military necessity. Yes, I was following orders. Yes, I was trying to survive. Yes, in that moment, I did what I had to do. But none of that changes the fact that a 14-year-old boy died, and I'm the one who killed him. Klaus Zimmermann, born 1931, died 1945, loved mathematics, loved his sister, was terrified of being a soldier,
tried to do the right thing to protect his family, was killed by 3 American soldiers in a destroyed building in Germany during the final months of World War II. One of those soldiers was me, Frank Morrison, and I've carried his memory for 80 years, not as penance, not as punishment, but as a reminder that every life matters, every death matters, and we owe it to the people whose lives we have taken to remember them as more than casualties, to remember them as human beings who deserved better than what they got. If you take anything from this story, let it be this: war is not an adventure. It's not glorious. It's not something to take lightly. War is the death of children. War is impossible choices that haunt you forever. War is guilt that never fades. And if we're going to send our young people into war, we owe it to them and to everyone they'll have to kill to make damn sure it's absolutely necessary. Because the cost is too high. The weight is too heavy. And it never, ever goes away. Klaus Zimmermann, if you're listening somehow, wherever you are, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You deserved better. You deserved a long life. You deserved to become that engineer. You deserved to see your sister grow old. And I took that from you. I can't give it back. I can't make it right. All I can do is remember you. All I can do is tell your story. All I can do is make sure people know you existed and you mattered. That's all any of us can do in the end. Remember, bear witness, tell the truth, even when it's ugly, especially when it's ugly. Because the moment we stop telling these stories, the moment we let the Klauses of the world fade into forgotten statistics, that's when we lose our humanity completely. Subscribe if you want to hear more truth from an old soldier who's running out of time to tell it.